What's up, everybody? Welcome in another edition of the First and Orange podcast. Denver Post Broncos crew here. Parker Gabriel, Ryan McFadden. Hey, Ryan, are you enjoying being on the Broncos beat yet?
Uh, I say it's TBD right now.
Yeah,
Just like everyone, just like the players, it's still early to make the decision, but it's been quite a interesting start to say the least.
yeah, that's right. Well, I told you when you were getting the job and when you started that there was never a lack of stuff going on, and that's certainly been the case not only through the off season but into the first 2 weeks of the regular season. Denver 0-2, obviously two home losses, Vegas last week, and Washington 35-33, complete with a Hail Mary, a failed 2-point conversion, a bad defensive effort, all that kind of stuff. So, Ryan, you've been watching the tape. We've talked to Sean Payton now since we were on Sunday night after the game. We've had a chance to sort of, look back at it and all of that. When you think about whether it's opportunity missed or just something that Denver really didn't do well, where do you start? Because, like you say, it is a long season. There's a lot of football left. We'll talk plenty about Miami here in a few minutes. But there is this sense that there's still time to get it going and sort of salvage maybe even a good season or a decent season, but there's not a lot of time to waste at this point. So what's the thing in your mind that's got to get cleaned up going forward?
I think one thing that got to get cleaned up is the defense.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest things because when you look at the numbers offensively, I feel like they've been solid. Except overall, I feel like they've been a solid offensively, a lot better than what we saw last year. When you look back at
Yes.
those games, I think Russell Wilson. I know like he gets a lot of criticism, but he looks a lot better than he was last year as well. I think one of my biggest criticism with them is terms of finishing out games and when and closing out games on the offensive end. I felt they were stretched in week two where I feel like the offense just fell flat. There was and this took away the momentum from them. Like we talked about the interception to Emmanuel Forbes, that fumble. I really feel like that fumble was a big difference maker there. But I think one of the things we need to go back to is that defense because the defense has not looked like a top 10 defense as we went into the season expecting they can be. It starts from like when we saw the game is like they just kept getting beat badly, but with those screen passes, we saw them get sacks. We saw them get 4 sacks, but sometimes I feel like they overcommit to the pass rush to the point where they're leaving open space on the field, and we saw the Commanders take advantage of that with a couple screen passes for 20 plus yards from Howell to Brian Robertson. That big 36, excuse me, that
Yeah.
36-yard reception from Antonio Gibson that set up that go ahead touchdown that gave from Robinson that gave them that 28-24 lead in the third quarter. So the fourth quarter. So I feel like that's some of their biggest problems have been on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not on the bandwagon. I'm not in favor of like you see a lot of fans saying let's get rid of Vance Joseph this early in the season. I feel like this is something where you're gonna have to let it play out and see how the defense progresses.
Right.
Like I feel like maybe like by week 5 or week 6, we can start having a serious conversation about uh, Vance Joseph's job so far. But I think 2 games in is still a little too early. But like the defense has been like one of my biggest concerns overall.
Yeah, it's interesting, Ryan. I mean, neither of us were here or covering this team when Vance Joseph was a head coach. A lot of fans, and it's not. I mean, I can't tell them that they're wrong. Fans feel how they feel. It's like Mike Tomlin said when the fans were chanting for Matt Canada to be fired as they were winning a game last night. It's like, you appreciate the passion, and fans here, obviously, a lot of them have baked in opinions about Vance Joseph already because of his tenure here as a head coach. So he knew coming back here that he would be under the microscope from the start. And obviously they're not off to a good start. I thought it was interesting. And I don't know if you'd expect him to necessarily say anything a lot different than what he did. But Alex Singleton, when we talked to him on Monday this week, he said, look, some teams struggle to tackle early in the season. You just don't get that many live reps, especially starters. Like, they played maybe 30 snaps or something in the preseason. And so that's hard to replicate. I think it's also fair to point out what Sean Payton said after the game Sunday, which is that they're going to face a lot better offenses than Las Vegas and Washington. Although, Vegas scored a lot of points last year, and they're obviously dangerous with Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams and all of that. So, yeah, it's an interesting spot to be in. I just thought, sort of like to your point, Ryan, on the screen game really killed them. And some of that is, it seems like they didn't generate hardly any pressure on Jimmy Garoppolo week 1. And then maybe they sort of like overcorrected in week 2, where it was just like pin your ears back and get to Sam Howell at all costs. And not only did they leave those, that sort of vulnerability in the middle of the field and short and intermediate screen game and all that stuff, but also, you saw in the one to Gibson, the 36-yarder. They got an offensive lineman out, Sadiq Charles, I think, out to Singleton. There's nobody else there. And then, the pursuit's slow, and then 4 guys, he cuts back against the grain, and 3 Denver guys fall down, and he cuts back across 4 of them. It's bad leverage, it's bad technique, and all of that. And that's stuff that, like, I think if you were trying to talk a little bit of calm into fans, you'd say, like, how many times have you seen Justin Simmons make that play, right? How many times have you seen Alex Singleton and Josie Jewell make that play? So you expect it to get better. At the same time, like, it's no knock on Asang Bassi. It's no knock on anybody who's playing safety, Delaire and Turner Yell, but they miss K'Wan Williams, who's going to be out a while still after he had ankle surgery in late August, playing the nickel. They miss his physicality. They miss his tackling and his toughness and his smarts. Bassi, they trust him. He missed a couple tackles on Sunday. So did Delaire and Turner Yell when he got forced into action after Kareem Jackson got suspended. So, that's not an excuse in the NFL. You got to play with who you got on any weekend and figure out a way to get the job done. I'll be interested to see if they mix up their personnel at all, or sort of how they handle, especially the sub stuff, because they played so much base against Las Vegas, and then they played a ton of sub against Washington. And obviously you would imagine that it would be a nickel and dime heavy game coming up, given the receivers and the weapons that Miami has. So all of that's going to be pretty interesting to watch. I think you're right, Ryan. They lead the league in points per drive offensively. It's early. They haven't been perfect. Outside of the Hail Mary, like crunch time hasn't been great. But yeah, the defense on week 1 says, hey, man, we held a team to 17 points. That should win a lot of games. And then week 2, the offense says, hey, man, we scored 33 points. That should win a lot of games. And yet here they are, 0-2.
Yeah, it's crazy because it's like you saw the signs from the defense. Like you said, they held the Raiders to 37 points, and then they were concerned about the offense not putting points on the board. So then when the offense did put points on the board, it's like we haven't found that balance yet. And another thing I want to take away is just going back on the offensive side is like Marvin Mims. Like I believe he had 17. He played 17 offensive snaps in week 1, 16 in week 2. I feel like he's a guy. You saw what he did: 2 catches for 113 yards. I feel like they got to figure out a way to get him more snaps on the field. And that's I'm not trying to discredit Cortland Sutton. I think Cortland Sutton is a talented receiver. I think Jerry Jeudy is, but they gotta find some way with those guys, Sutton, Jeudy, Mims, all those. They give Marvin Mims some more opportunities, because we saw it out there. We saw those big plays abilities. That's something we knew when they drafted him. Why they did that, because he can make those plays. So that's one thing I would like to see moving forward. Is there a way like they can get Marvin Mims a lot more offensive opportunities?
You know what's interesting about that? So, obviously, like anybody that watched the game was like, oh, that guy should probably be on the field. And then I found myself thinking, not to the same degree, but like Brandon Johnson, you see the speed, he catches the crossing route for the touchdown, the 16-yarder early in the game. And you sort of see, we think of him sometimes as a role player. He's willing to block. He's willing to sort of do the dirty work from the receiving standpoint. But the thing that Sean Payton points out every time he talks about Brandon Johnson is that he can run. And you saw that. You saw the speed, legitimate speed. And so, like, I know how it works. They're not going to target Brandon Johnson 13 times a game or anything like that. But it was interesting because I thought that about Mims. I thought that about Brandon Johnson. And then the other thing I thought was, how do you lead a game by 10 at halftime and only get your running backs 14 total carries in a game? 12 for Javonte Williams, 1 for P. Ryan, and 1 for Jaleel McLaughlin, which was the touchdown. And so, like, I think I think you can justify all of those thoughts. And at the same time, like if I'm Sean Payton listening to this, which he assuredly is not, I would be like, so wait a second, you want to get maybe the number 3 receiver more involved. You want to get the number 4 receiver more involved, and you're going to say we got to run the ball more. Like what is it that you actually want? And that would be a fair counter. And to me, all of that is sort of about the race that Peyton talks about over the first 4 or 5 weeks to get to improve and to figure out who you are. Like I think they've shown these like flashes of being dynamic on offense and being able to be dangerous on offense. And we've seen times where it's gone bad, but at the end of the day, like they're in this process, I think, and they need to do it relatively quickly to figure out, okay, what are the things that we are really going to do? Is Marvin Mims this role this year playing 15 to 20 snaps and throwing them a couple deep balls a game? Or is he a featured player, right? Like Jaleel McLaughlin, is he just a change of pace guy as a rookie, or does he need 10 touches a game? Not everybody can get 10 touches a game. So that process of figuring that out, I think, Sean Payton has a track record of doing that. And if they can do that with this offense, I think they've got a chance. They may not be the greatest show on turf or whatever, but they've got a chance to be pretty good, I think, if they can stay relatively healthy and sort of make progress in winnowing down, what their identity is.
Yeah, I agree. I think when we look at these first 2 games, we saw promising signs from the run game against Las Vegas, and then we hardly saw it from their top backs, from Williams and P. Ron against the Commanders.
Yeah,
like you
after
said,
the
P.
first 2
Ron,
snaps.
like you said, P. Ron only had 1 attempt, which that's pretty surprising. So I feel like I don't know if Peyton's in this situation where he's still trying to figure out what he's trying to do. Like I know he talks about the run game, but like I don't know. So far through 2 games, that emphasis to me hasn't been there yet.
Right.
Where that whole idea we've heard since the offseason is they're going to run the rock. They're going to run the rock. They're going to use their run game to help open up the offense. So far, we haven't seen that just yet. Then we saw spurts of the passing game against the Commander. Like we said, we saw what Marvin Mims could do, Brandon Johnson. So I think we're in this point through 2 games where I feel like I guess Sean Payton's experimenting a little bit, trying to figure out all right what he has, what works well, what doesn't. So, man, I think they're going to be solid offensively. I truly believe. I think Russell Wilson. I'm still a believer in Russell Wilson. And even when you look at his numbers, he still has that. He still has the capability of running the show. Obviously, like Sean Payton talked about a lot about like the way they went in and out of huddles were a bit concerning. I feel like there's sometimes during games, I feel like Russ just goes missing in a sense where like he starts off with a ton of momentum, then boom, there's nothing there. But overall, there are a lot of pleasing signs. But I feel like through 2 games, it still looks like it's an offense that Sean Payton is still trying to figure out what worked and what doesn't.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we'll see what Sean Payton says about it over the course of the week. He said one of the things that he said, the part that I think got the most attention about the issues with the huddle, he said maybe we have to reduce the verbiage, and the quote that got a lot of run was that Russ has to be quicker, relaying the plays. But I think when you watch it, and you can't tell everything from just like the broadcast, but especially the one they called the first time out they took was the play, like they were trying to set up the play that Jaleel McLaughlin scored the touchdown on from the 5-yard line. And to me, like, I'm not laying the blame all with Peyton necessarily, but that was one where the subs didn't run on the field until the play clock was at 22. You're bringing 4 guys on, 4 guys off, and then Washington can sub 2 once you decide to as the offense. And so like that one was not Russell Wilson being slow to spit out the play. I mean, they weren't in the huddle and getting the play call until there's 15 seconds left on the clock. And typically that's when Peyton wants them at the line. They broke the huddle with like 7 seconds. So it's not one thing, right? Like, I think that's something that the Broncos struggled with last year. It's something that they struggled with in week 2 this year. And the common denominator there largely is Russ, because the coaching staff's entirely different. But I think I'm sure he has a hand in that, but I think that is the a coaching staff that's never worked together to, still figuring things out, especially as they sort of introduce more wrinkles and they tried to run a lot of different personnel groups in and out and all of that. So, yeah, I mean, I think, it's definitely easy to pick things out with Russell Wilson. He's certainly missed things that you don't expect him to miss. And he's also, through 2 weeks, he's 4th in the NFL in passer rating. He's tied for 8th in expected points added per snap. So it's not like he's been terrible. He's been pretty good. So if they get that rate of play from him for the rest of the year, which obviously, we got to see, but they'll figure some things out around him, I think, if that's the case, even if that means, he's not perfect, obviously.
Yeah, I think so. And like I said, I feel like what we see for these first 2 games it's like Russell Wilson's working for the whole new coaching staff. The coaching staff is they're I feel like everyone is still learning one another. And I feel like that's been a little bit of the problems as well. But yeah, that's what I've seen. It's like there's Payton's still trying to figure out how to run the show. I guess like Wilson's still trying to learn this coaching staff a little bit. But overall, there are some positive signs to take away from the offense. But yeah, it's crazy to see how the past 2 games has played out.
No doubt. How many points? Okay, so let's talk about Miami. How many points do they got to win to beat or how many points do they have to score to beat the Dolphins on Sunday in Miami?
Oh man, 38. No,
yeah, right. Yeah, it can't set the number high enough by NFL standards, probably.
Yeah, I just look at that where you allow 35 points to the Commanders, and then you're going against one of the more dominant offenses in the league right now, in the Miami Dolphins, with perhaps one of the best wide receivers in Tyreek Hill, who is pretty much unstoppable with his speed. So it's going to be a challenge. I feel like if they want to compete, it might be a situation where they might have to score 30 plus points to pull this off. Just from what we've seen from this defense, I'm not too encouraged from the start. And even though I feel like even though Alex Singleton said that he expects them to get better as the season progresses, but like I don't know if that's going to happen in week 3 against the Miami Dolphins. I know. I just don't see it. Not in week 3. Maybe they'll gain that momentum playing to the Bears, but in week 3 against that offense, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Sean Payton was sort of like, he was a little bit miffed, it seemed like, after the opener, that each team only had the ball 6 times when they played the Raiders. Like it almost never happens in the NFL. But if there was a week to try to make it a six possession game on each side, like this would be it for Denver, right? Just to control the pace. And so I don't know. I mean, obviously I'm not part of the game planning process here as they get into the week, but it does seem like the kind of game where the offense has to help the defense. And one of the things that Sean Payton said after the Washington loss was that they didn't do a good enough job of helping the defense, even though he also said the defense played poorly. Like the turnovers gave him the ball out around midfield. It just wasn't, it was one of those games. You've got to be on your P's and Q's against the Dolphins in that regard. I can still go 85 on you or whatever, but you got to make them do that. It can't be, Bradley Chubb, strip sack and you take over at the 50. I mean, that's just asking to have a big number put up. So it's a ball control kind of game. It's a game management kind of game. It's the kind of game that you want a head coach like Sean Payton for, because you need every advantage you can get. As good as Mike McDaniel is obviously in Miami, you need every advantage you can get to try to be in control of the game, even if in control of the flow of the game, even if you end up trailing by a little bit or down early or whatever. So that's really to me, like that's the name of the game, is if you what if Washington had the ball on Sunday for 33 minutes and 45 seconds. If Denver's in that range on Sunday, they'll probably have a chance. They're still going to be, they're 6.5 point underdogs, but that to me, like that's the recipe. Not to completely take the air out of the ball, but if you control the game flow, you can have a chance at least.
Yeah, that's the key. And I feel like when you're going against the Dolphins, I feel like the Broncos offense got to play like a near perfect game. You can't have the fumbles, you can't have the interceptions. Um, they just can't do that. You want to control the ball as much as possible. At the same time, you're not trying to give them as much momentum. And I feel like those type of turnovers, it just snaps the momentum right out of you. And they just can't do that against this Miami team.
Yeah, and then obviously, Miami's got, they've got some really good players on defense too. Chubb, a little bit of a reunion. Obviously, got traded from, played the first 3.5 years of his career in Denver, 4.5 years of his career in Denver, and then got traded in at the deadline last year. Denver got the first round pick for him that they used to then acquire the right to hire Sean Payton. So a reunion there. Javon Holland's a great player, obviously. They've got a bunch on the defensive side of the ball too. And they're the opposite of Denver so far. I mean, they're 2-0 and they've won on the road twice already. It's the home opener in Miami, which is sort of crazy given that we're going into week 3 here. But yeah, it's going to be a super interesting one. And then Mike McDaniel, obviously, listeners will know, or some will at least. Grew up in the Denver area. He's from around the way here. So obviously, it's one of those games, and there's a bunch on the schedule this year where there's all sorts of connections between the teams, and it's going to be really interesting to see what it looks like down there in the heat and humidity this weekend.
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to this game. I think my prediction probably will be I got Miami winning this one. I was 34 to what I got 34-26 Miami winning this game. I think the offense is gonna. I think Denver's offense is gonna be solid, but overall, I feel like I don't think the defense is going to get there. Is going to get it together again by week 3. So I think it's going to be close, but I think in the end, I think the Dolphins are going to pull this one out.
Yeah, I've got Miami too. I'll say 31-20. I think they end up winning by 2 scores. And it's sort of similar to what you said, Ryan. I mean, it just, at this point, I picked Denver to win week 1 and then picked them to win week 2. And back seems like ages ago when I did the game by game for the magazine, I had them losing at Miami. I think that, that would be the sort of expectation in general. But I haven't seen anything over the first 2 weeks that makes me think like, yeah, this is the week they break through. So an 0-3 start obviously would not ideal. But it's like Sean Payton said on Sunday, like he said he was asked about how 0-2 teams rarely make the playoffs and all that. And he said, yeah, but the thing about that is there's nothing I can do to change the fact that we're 0-2. All I can do is try to get the team in position to win the next one. So don't know if that's going to happen. I think it would constitute a surprise. But the schedule, like the New York game obviously looks different in week 5 with Aaron Rodgers out. They've got a little time, a few weeks here to sort of figure out who they are with Zach Wilson. But with Chicago and the Jets, coming up after this trip to Miami, who knows? Maybe you still won this weekend. Either way, I mean, it's not an all hope is lost situation. It's not good, but there's some games that if you really do make those improvements over the first quarter of the season, that you should win coming up on the schedule.
Yeah, I agree. Like I don't feel like it's all downhill just yet. Even how like these past 2 games have ended, I feel like if they can get things fixed, if they can get their act together, I feel like there are games I think that with Aaron Rodgers out for the season, it just could be a winnable game. I look at the Packers, the Bears. I don't know. I don't know about Kansas City just yet.
You're not going to pick this. You're not going to say the streak's ending just yet.
I don't know just yet. It's I don't know. I don't know just yet. But I feel like there are certain games that they can pull off if they can figure it out. But I don't think it would happen in week against the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, well, it's going to be. I mean, Ryan, 5 weeks from now, we're either going to be talking about the turnaround that Sean Payton's engineered, or we're going to be talking about Caleb Williams and Drake May. So There's going to be stuff to talk. There's going to be stuff to talk about one way or another. Well, let's leave it there. Obviously, middle of the week, we'll talk to Denver players and coaches over the course of the week. I guess just one note before we go: the injury situation right now looks pretty clear for the Broncos. Greg Dulcich is on IR. He's out till at least week 6. We're not in that range yet where the short-term IR guys can come back. That'll be after week 4 as soon as that can happen. And the only injury that we know of from Sunday was De'Aaron Turner-Yell. That was just a cramping issue. So you would think he'd be sort of back in the mix this week. So pretty straightforward this week on that front. We'll leave it there for now. We'll be back. Try to jump on later in the week. And then obviously Sunday after the game, come find us on social. We'll be chatting about the game once all our stuff is filed. In the meantime, obviously ton of content, denverpost.com/Broncos for all the latest. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Facebook, Denver Post Broncos, and of course, read at the Denver Post website. That's Ryan. I'm Parker. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you guys next time.